Okay. Well, I hope this works. I hope this works well, all things considered. Hello. This is unscripted, and it probably should be. I am upset and angry, as I think most people in the world are. And I think if we are to find a common ground, if we are to find a way to move forward, we have to have a greater, better understanding of the way things currently are. So, that is what this is going to be. It is context, because I think context is important. So, this is the universe according to Goose. Hello, that's me. Hi. And so, to begin, what we will do is we will imagine an ocean. Because we're going to imagine space. And space cannot be imagined. So we will imagine an ocean, knowing that it is fewer dimensions. It is simpler. It is flatter. Water has a unique property called surface tension, where something can put pressure on the top of water and it won't break. You can see this with some spiders and uh, a lizard I can think of where they can walk on water. They distribute their weight across pads and across legs to be able to skitter across water without breaking the surface of the water. So this is the fabric of the universe. That's surface. The surface tension is the fabric of the universe. Now, in reality, in space, it is in more than three dimensions. It's much, much more. And we can't see it because everything that we know is this bit of surface tension. And the surface tension of space is immense. It is one of the strongest things we can understand. But it is there, and it is still a breakable thing. Now, when it is a breakable thing, it's not that it destroys all of existence. Because if you make a wave in a pond, and it is big enough wave that it breaks the surface tension, the water just continues being water. Before and after the breakage, before all around, surrounding where the water breaks, it's still just water, and the rest of the water still has the same surface tension. This is how it works. Now, to help better explain it, we're going to go down to a string. Because I'm going to assume that I need to kind of explain everything. That's the assumption I'm going to make. So you have a string. You move this string up and down, left and right, move it in any way that you want. And you're holding one end of it. And you can watch your movements move across the string to the other end. You make big, huge movements, and it moves across the string. And you can move it up really quick and move it down really quick. And what you will see is that it has a very narrow ripple, like it moves up and down, like it has this jump that the string will do, and it's very narrow, and it moves across the string. Now, what is unique, or what is interesting, what is important, is that every movement that you make moves at the same speed. It can be as big as you want, it can be as quick as you want, in the sense that it very quickly changes heights, but it moves across the string at the same speed. This is very, very, very important. And it's true for water too. The ripples in the pond move away from you in two dimensions, in a circle around you, across the surface of the water at the same speed. Now, for this to, it's. We're going to now move to something bigger. We now have things that have mass. We're on the water. We're on a boat. We're in a boat that that doesn't break the surface of the water. It floats still. It still is above water, and it is being held up a certain amount of height above the water's surface. But the surface of the water doesn't break for this example. And what you have is, you have this much easier thing where you can skip pebbles across the water. But interestingly, when you skip a pebble across the water in this scenario, it does kind of break the surface of the water. The pebble is doing interesting things as it hits and skips, because it's not always in contact with the surface of the water. It's moving up and it's down and up and down. It's moving away from the surface of the water. I have to go back. I'm out of order. So, the ripples in the water is light. That is what light is. You stand in a boat, you hit the inside of the boat, right? And you see these ripples move across the surface of the water. These ripples are light. They are the electromagnetic spectrum. They are waves that move across existence itself, the universe, space. And the height of the water, the frequency of the ripples, the how high you move the string and how quickly you move the string, that determines the color of the light and how bright it is. But it always moves across the surface of the lake at the same speed. Now, if you were able to make a big enough splash in this, that it had a high enough amplitude that it is so much more than what that amount of water can contain in terms of energy, it will break the surface. And what this looks like in physics is, it's not really that it's breaking the surface, it's more that it's kind of doing this thing where a bit of water flies away from the lake to be a droplet of energy, to store that energy as it continues moving out and rippling out. So like the surface of the lake has got a kink in it. It's got a twist to it that disconnects it to store the energy that it can't contain within the ripple. Now I'm going to call this electrons, because this is photons, but it's more of photon rays. This is why things are supposed to be scripted, because it's when the light waves, when the ripples have enough energy that they do something unique, where they break the surface, they become something new. And my hypothesis, my belief, my suspicion, my idea is that when it breaks the surface tension of the water to kind of create and store this bit of extra energy, because it's too much for the surface of the water to contain and handle, that's where we get matter. Now, most of the time that we see this in, say, the CERN Large Hadron Collider, its ripple is 2 points in different directions. And so that's a ripple up and a ripple down, in the sense that like it's a nice explosion of energy that is mirrored above the surface of the water and below the surface of the water. It's a singular point where the surface has been broken. And what it will do is it will collapse back down to just being the surface of the water again, just to be water again. But there's ways in which it can manifest differently, where it would, I believe, I don't have proof of this, that this is what makes matter. Matter is when there's so much energy that it isn't constrained to surface tension, and it stores that energy in a new form. So what they kind of turn into, for the sake of imagination, is a pebble. And this is where we get back to the pebbles. You skip the pebble across the surface of the water, and it hits the water and it moves up above the water and it's not in contact, and then it hits the water again and it makes these tiny ripples, these little bitty ripples as it goes across. This is an electron, because electrons skip across reality. They skip across the physical aspects of existence. That is how I'm going to refer to it and how I'm going to think about it, because electrons aren't always real. They do interesting things and they kind of cheat. And it's important too that every time it hits the water, it makes a ripple, because that ripple is electromagnetism. It makes electromagnetism. That's what electrons do. That's why we have the electricity and technology that we have, is because electrons moving up and down cause the creation of new waves, which is how we have radio, how we have TV, how we have microwaves, how we have, and the harnessing of that is how we have alternating current. And it's efficient because instead of transferring a wave, so if we have a wave worth of energy, and instead of transferring it from Chicago to Springfield as a single large wave that is holding all of that energy as it moves across the top surface of the water, what we do instead is we have a string of pebbles in like a Newton's cradle, where they collide with the surface of the water and each other to push and move this wave, but constantly re-upping it. So it's a small wave that is able to be maintained and sustained across the surface of the water as these tiny little movements, these tiny little jumps, these tiny little bumps against the surface. So this is what alternating current is it's small, rapid shifts of bouncing against the surface of the water, as opposed to DC current, which is a huge, monumental push of water to push this wave up and push it across. That's why it's so much more inefficient to use DC, and why you don't transfer that across the country as DC. Inside of the house, that's fine. You're within a small range, and that's okay. That's a good way to push water in your home, but once you try to leave your home, you need to do these much smaller, more intricate, rhythmic patterns of just creating these waves across this distance with all of the different pebbles. And the pebbles are just bouncing. They're just bouncing up and down and up and down, and they're just making these ripples over and over and over again, sustaining this waveform, sustaining this energy across this distance. It's incredibly cool. And to move on to the next step of reality for this building block that we're doing, which we're skipping over some of the more interesting things about quantum mechanics, because we're going to come back to those things. But this is all about building towards something. And so we have the question of gravity. And gravity, in my opinion, is that thing that it is a singular entity that is represented in 3 different distinct ways that we've interacted with it. That was a sentence. So, hadrons are large subatomic, like they're atomic things. They're big atomic things. They are things that have mass, that we quantify as having mass, which is pretty much, it's just protons and neutrons. That's all it is. So, for the moment, in the world, in the universe, according to Goose, the Higgs boson isn't a thing. I am sorry, and I know that this will have contention, but in the way in which I understand the universe and will explain it and think about it and hold it to be true, the Higgs boson isn't a thing. To explain this, as it somewhat is important, maybe, is that we are in a cement canoe, right? It's a canoe. It's still buoyant and it's funny. I enjoy it because it's funny. But we're on the surface of the water. We're moving across the surface of the water in a canoe, and we look around and we go, "Why are we floating? Why are we on top of the water?" And we get a bunch of scientists together, and they're like, "Okay, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take both of these 2 cement canoes, And we can collide them together as hard as we possibly can, in just the fastest speed that we can make a cement canoe go. Again, I'm doing this because it's funny that they're cement, because cement canoes work, they're functional. It's not the most sensible way to explain this. But so they collide, and they explode out. Now, both of them will have a part of the canoe that is a little bit flatter, a tiny bit denser, and will explode down. And it will explode into the water and have this cavitation effect where it is causing bubbles to pull down into the water and flow down. And it will cause this huge, explosion in a way of energy inside the water that we are floating on top of. Now, to me, the Higgs boson is looking at that part of the cement canoe and going, that is its own distinct building block of reality that gives everything mass. So that's what I mean when I say the Higgs boson isn't a thing. It's because it's not. It's just a representation of a part of the shape of a thing, because it's the shape of it that's important. All of matter is made up of simply just protons and neutrons. And so similar to how cement is just made up of silica and other silica. I don't remember. It's two things, isn't it? It's not the important thing. The important thing is it's a single kind of liquid, like it was once a liquid, now it's a solid thing made up of just a bunch of stuff that's equally distributed. So like protons and neutrons are just equally distributed across matter. And it's the shape that it takes. And there might be people who take issue with that because they like the idea of it being distinct building blocks, Lego pieces. But the thing is, all of reality, everything around you, no matter how this bizarre and different and unique every single thing that you see is, you can fill your house with everything, right? You could just anything on TV, everything in your room, your book, your clothes, your blanket, your table, your floor, your shoes. All of these things, all of them, are just protons and neutrons together in different orientations, different configurations, different shapes. So reality is a shape. And the shape that it takes is important in the sense that it's shaped like a canoe, and this is how we float. Now, to go back to the second about the fact that the lake is not really a lake, right? It is space. It is this huge vastness above us that is all around us. So that means that a canoe in that environment is not going to be shaped like a canoe. It's going to be shaped much more like a weird sphere. It's going to be shaped like the Earth, which is an sphere, spheroid. Spheroid is the second part of this. Obligoid. Anyways, oblong, the word oblong, where it's you take a circle and you stretch it. So it's that, but it's for a sphere. The Earth is a sphere that's been stretched. It's been flattened slightly. It's if you had a ball of meat and you pushed on it slightly and you wanted to make a really disgusting hamburger where it's just a little bit flatter, but it's still very much a sphere, that's the Earth. And that's kind of the shape that things take. Now, the main reason why the Earth is shaped like that is because it's spinning. But the point is, it is a sphere because that's how it interacts with reality around it, in much the same way that boats and canoes have a curved shape to stay afloat on the water. All matter has a spherical shape to it because that's how it stays afloat in the fabric of space that we have, fabric of reality. The way that you stay afloat is to be a sphere. So everything at its core, at its base, at its smallest level, is sphere. It's got sphere in it, but it's none of it is ever a perfect sphere. Nothing is a perfect sphere. And so one of the things I say that I think about that I think is cool is I talk about spirals, because spirals are not a circle. It's a circle that doesn't complete itself. It's also kind of like the orbit of the Earth around the sun. It's easy to call that a spiral because we are in constant motion through the universe. And so as such, we never go back to the same point twice. We never return to where we were. We orbit the sun, and relative to the sun, it can seem like and appear like we have returned to where we were, but we are not where we were, because the entire solar system has moved through the fabric of reality. And this is another one of those things where you can have a moment of confusion, because we're in an infinite ocean. All around you is Oceania. And this is where you get the theory of relativity, because we're all objects in this ocean, floating on top the surface. Everything that we do is relative to each other. There is no solid firma. There is no ground to stand on. Everything is floating. We're all on boats. Now, this isn't completely true, because there is a way that you can still measure us with respect to the fabric of the universe. The fabric of the universe still has a measured effect to it. Because it's still there, it's still real. So we can talk about things with respect to the universe itself. So that's one of those things that I think is funny, is that like the theory of relativity is very true, but it also proves that there is something real to measure against. Which I can go into more, but that is my other take where people will disagree with me and take contention with what I say, which I have a very short comment about that. The theory of relativity states that we can treat motion as independent reference frames, as relative reference frames, in a non-inertial reference frame, which nothing is non-inertial. Everything has inertia. Everything is being affected by gravity and the inertia of events. So none of this is actually a non-inertial reference frame. You can treat it as such for a great deal of situations, but at the end of the day, we still are in a universe where we can measure it against the universe itself. But that is beside the point. The point is, everything is made up of shapes that are slightly spherical from the energy of ripples of water. Everything you see and you hear and you breathe and you move is this ocean of the universe being made manifest. It is nothing in the sense of you're on an infinite ocean, but this is a reality where when you put enough energy into the ocean, you can pull a pebble out of the surface of the ocean, where the pebble and how this would look like is, it won't be easy. This is monumental things, but like we're talking like the Big Bang is this huge event where the fabric of reality, the ocean beneath the surface, sprang forth and created matter. Everything is made up of energy, and the energy is from beneath the surface of the water, and it's been spun up into these shapes, and these shapes are in order. There's the photon, which is just the wave. It is the wave of light. It is very physical and impactful because it's still filled with energy. It's still filled with the materia that makes everything. But it is a wave, and it's a form of physicality. It's a form of a particle in the idea of it. Then there's the electron, which is the pebble, where it is inconsistent in how it interacts with the surface of reality, because it is a wave form and a particle. It is both a wave and a particle. It's both the ripples that it impacts on the surface and itself moving in away from the surface while also being this physical thing. It's small enough that it is never fully always in contact with reality. We see this with the double slit experiment. The double slit experiment is that, so they had two slits in a parchment and they sent electrons through it. This is a very brusque explanation, but they sent electrons through it and it had a waveform. But when they tried to figure out how it was getting this waveform, it became just two lines where the electron would either go through the right one or the left one. And so that is to say that we can see that the way electrons behave is very unique. It can be a wave. It can behave like a wave. It can do things the way waves do, but it also behaves like a particle because it is both. Because all of reality is, for lack of a better word, it's a solid wave. It's when the wave is so big, so standing, so stationary, so much energy, that it takes on a new form, a new shape that we call matter. And so then what you get is you have these very big solid pieces of energy curled up as spheres on the surface of the water in this infinite ocean, and they cause this distortion in the surface, right? Causes this dip in the surface of the water as it's holding up the boats. This dip is gravity. That's the curvature of space-time. That is gravity. That is the theory of relativity as it interacts with and bends all of the different things. The way the waves propagate across the water is affected by this dip in the surface. I'm getting really weird about the explanations. But so this is the point that I'm trying to get at in as a roundabout of a fashion, as I'm always going to be doing, is that everything that you've ever seen or encountered or interacted with is just a great deal of energy in a very unique shape. An infinitely unique shape. That everything in the universe is the spiraling of energy, building up and colliding and interacting with each other in new and unique ways, and creating more and more things. We went from an ocean to objects. We went from those objects to bigger objects, to planets, to stars. And then we went from stars to planets that had atmosphere that gained primordial soup. And that soup was just this combination of very interesting things that have been made, these different shapes of reality, of matter, and they coalesced into it's unavoidable. We have to take a second to talk about chaos. I didn't want to talk about chaos in this moment because it doesn't feel like it should be related, but it is. So chaos is going to be explained interestingly. In case you hadn't noticed, that's how everything's going to work with me. Chaos, well, because I want it to be its own standalone video. So I will say chaos is tied up here, and I'm going to maybe at some point I'll record a video on chaos and I will link it here so you can watch a better explanation of how chaos works. But so through chaos, it became life. And then that life became multicellular life. And that multicellular life became so complex that it gained, because as it was moving through life, it got more and more complex behaviors to be able to sustain life and propagate life and create more out of this universe. Constantly, what the universe is doing is creating more. It's growing and expanding infinitely. And every aspect of life has gotten more complex, gotten better at sustaining itself. And what happens is it gets slightly more of a remainder with its thinking capabilities, with its complexities. And what you see is that they got good enough at sustaining themselves that the life reached a level of sentience, what we would refer to as sentience, and then sapience, self-awareness. They're aware that they are capable of thinking. Now, you might, because we live in a society that still has a large influence from religion, you might say, oh, you're now broaching on the soul, but it's not. The soul is not part of this conversation. We are not actually different from other life forms. We're not. The difference between humans and birds really, it just comes down to, at the end of the day, and this is this is the entire universe according to Goose. Humans are vulnerable for much longer in their lifespan than any other animal on the planet. We made the choice, evolutionarily speaking, 10,000 years ago, to say that we will spend more of our time and energy taking care of our young. And what this did is it allowed our young to become way more complex intellectually speaking, mentally. The capabilities of what our brain can do was given this chance to grow. In the animal kingdom, we're in all the other animals, they have a much shorter distance from being born to having to take care of themselves. And it's when you don't have to use your brain to take care of itself that it is capable of growing, that it is capable of making something new, that it is capable of expanding, that it is capable of taking on these qualities that we call life, that we call art. So it is in our choice as a species to have young that we take care of that allowed us to appear different than other animals. If we spent generations raising crows that never had to fend for themselves and were catered for and taken care of, they would be able to become intelligent in a way that we would be able to say they are intelligent creatures, that they are able to be communicative, that we can talk to them, that they can make art. It is a slow thing because it involves genetic change for them, because their brain isn't wired to change as drastically. Our brain is wired to have years upon our life where it is moldable and much more elastic. But it is very much a thing that we could do. We could have every species on this planet become purely, truly sapient, able to converse with every single one of them. And this kind of comes to the point of my philosophy, where I think it's important to have this building block that we work towards, is that every living thing in the universe itself is growing, it is expanding, and all we are to do is to help it get there, to support one another, to give people as much as we can the ability to not need to fight for their own life. And they can expand. Their brain can expand like the infinite sea of the universe. And they can create things and think things and make art that never before existed, much like how life itself didn't exist once upon a time. We're talking about an infinite spiral of things growing and expanding, becoming more complex, becoming more beautiful, becoming more meaningful. Humans have the ability to take a rock and they give it meaning. They give it a name. They give it a spirit. They take a piece of dead animal hide and they stitch it together in octagonal shapes, and then they name it Wilson, and then people cry. This thing, it has a life now. It has a history, a past. It has somehow a psychology to it. When it was an inanimate object, we gave it meaning, we gave it life. And that's just a thing, that's just a ball. Imagine what people do when you give them what they need to thrive. We're talking about a universe that is constantly growing and expanding and becoming more beautiful, and our job within it is to help it become more beautiful and more meaningful, more complex, bigger. And we're talking about this in a world where there are those who wish to make it smaller, wish to look at people who are branching out from the norm in a way that hasn't been pursued before and saying, we must stop that, we must cull it, we must cut off the branch of the tree. No, the tree is growing. If you have a tree and it's growing and it is expanding and it's gaining branches, you don't cut off the branch that just grew. That's not how taking care of trees works. That's not how cultivation of life works. People are afraid of the infinite. They're afraid of the unknown. They're afraid of space. But space is just life. Not yet alive, but life nonetheless. We are part of an infinite symphony of moving waves of energy. Anyone who wishes to damage this, to prune it, to cut it back, they are something of an abhorrence. So, in this turbulent time, the point of importance in my mind is that we help cultivate life in every single one of its forms. As the universe continues expanding, as we continue to be better able to support every form of life, we do so. We do what we can to do so. And we don't cut back. We don't cut funding here. We don't cut people out of our lives there. We don't kill people. We don't isolate people. We support and accept and love every single person on this planet. Every single one. Now, it is important to note that sometimes the way that we show love and acceptance is going to be different person to person, and what they need is going to be different because they're all unique. They're all different. They all have different needs. They all have different aspects of their existence to care about and take care of. And at the end of the day, there are some people who should have no excess of power or money that they currently have. And they will view having it taken away from them as an attack. But it's not an attack. It's part of the healing process. Being given the opportunity to have a life where you don't have responsibilities, that you have nothing that you need to do to be alive, to be accepted, to be part of this world. That's a gift. As much as the autocrats don't want it to be that way, where they want to stay in control, where they want to stay in power, they want to stay the 1%, becoming one of the infinite, where they have no power, they have no expectations, they have no responsibilities, they have nothing that requires any of their time, and yet they are still alive. They're still able to eat, to do things, to read books. That's a gift that they should be given. No matter how forcefully it might have to at times be given to them. So this is my message to the world. It's time to listen to the symphony of the universe and take a step to make it a better place. to make our society in line with the spiraling curvature of existence, promoting life in every aspect of its existence, and giving everyone what they truly need, which for a lot of people is less power and less money, because it's not healthy for them. We can see that. We know that it's not healthy for them. So take the power and give it to everyone. The universe, according to Goose.